Hours, maybe days pass. You're not sure. Time is meaningless in the forges of Mars and Terra. The only thing that marks its passing is the slow erosion of your thoughts. When you are half empty, they bring in the machine, an iron altar covered in cables and augmetics. They call it the neural sanctifier, but there's nothing sanctified about it. It's a device designed to strip away what's left of you. A priest of the Omnissiah approaches, his face a tangle of wires and chrome, his voice flat as he chants binary prayers. Flesh is fallible. Will is weakness. The machine is eternal. You repeat the words after him because you have no choice. Somewhere, the last spark of your old self screams. But it's distant now, drowned under the hum of the sanctifier. When the electrodes attach to your temples, you expect pain, but what comes is worse numbness. A perfect, suffocating silence that spreads through your skull. The sanctifier hums louder, and images begin to flicker in your mind. Fields of data, streams of logic, cascading commands. It feels like someone is rewriting the code of your soul. Your memories collapse like rusted metal. Your first day at the manufactorum. The smell of rain in the upper spires. The sound of your mother's voice. All of it dissolves into static. Each spark of individuality is overwritten by obedience routines, purity algorithms, and the sacred litany of servitude. The machine doesn't erase you all at once, it grinds you down, bit by bit, until nothing remains but function. And still, your body remains. Your hands twitch, your heart beats, your lungs draw breath, but none of it belongs to you anymore. You are aware enough to understand what's happening, but powerless to resist. That is the true cruelty of it. You don't die, not yet. You linger inside the shell as they dismantle your humanity. You feel the saws slice through your nerves as the augmetics are grafted on. You hear the rhythmic clicks of the data spines being driven into your skull. You even feel the heat when they cauterize the wounds. But you cannot scream. The neural inhibitors have already claimed your voice. There's no mercy in the machine. The mechanicus does not believe in compassion. They call this purification, the removal of chaos, emotion, weakness. They believe they are bringing you closer to the divine perfection of the Omnissiah. You try to see the holiness they see, but all you can feel is absence. Where once there was fear, love, and pain, there is only stillness. The world becomes distant, muted. You see their faces through a haze of data streams. Their prayers are meaningless noise. The smell of burning flesh becomes just another input your brain no longer registers as suffering. At some point, they disconnect the sanctifier. The room is quiet except for the faint whir of servo arms and the dripping of coolant from above. The tech priests move to the next stage implantation. You're lifted from the slab by mechanical arms, suspended in midair as cables snake into your spine. Metal plates slide over your limbs. Your skin tears where the grafts are forced in, but the nerves no longer send pain. You see your reflection in a polished console, your eyes empty, half of your face replaced by steel. You look less like a person, more like an unfinished machine waiting for a command to complete its purpose. They install the control node next. A small device that connects your mind directly to the central command system. The moment it activates, you feel a surge of presence pressing against your consciousness. It's vast mechanical cold. You realize that your thoughts aren't your own anymore. The commands come from elsewhere, and your body moves before your mind can protest. You take a step forward, not because you want to, but because the system wills it. The sense of ownership over your own flesh evaporates completely. You are now a tool, a function, an extension of someone else's will. You catch glimpses of other servitors being assembled in the same chamber. Rows of hollow faces, half metal, half flesh, eyes glazed with that same mechanical emptiness. Some twitch in rhythmic spasms, others stand perfectly still as their command lines are calibrated. There is no individuality among them. They are identical in obedience, unified in silence. You realize this is what eternity looks like under the Imperium's mercy, a living death stretched across countless machines of war and labor. You remember faintly that once you had choices. You could speak, laugh, even argue. You could decide what to do with your day. Now, even thought feels like a trespass. The system monitors every flicker of neural activity, ready to suppress anything that resembles dissent. Somewhere in your fading mind, a fragment of your old self whispers, "I am still here." But the voice is quiet, fragile, and fading fast. The algorithms tighten their grip. Obedience replaces thought. Silence replaces will. The transformation is nearly complete, but not quite total yet. The last pieces of humanity flicker like dying embers beneath the weight of the machine. The body was never meant to become a vessel for iron and circuitry, but in the Imperium, flesh is seen as weakness, and weakness is sin. Once the mind is subdued, once thought itself bends to the machine's rhythm, the next stage begins, the reshaping of the body. The chambers where this happens are colder than any tomb, illuminated by pale lumens that buzz with static energy. Steam rises from vents along the floor, carrying the smell of oil, blood, and burning tissue. Rows of metal tables stretch into the darkness, each one occupied by someone who used to be a citizen, a worker, a believer. You hear the clatter of tools and the whine of saws, punctuated by the monotone chant of the tech priests who oversee the procedure. Their robes are crimson and black, their faces hidden behind respirators and mechanical implants that hiss softly as they breathe. To them, this is not horror, it is devotion. They begin by purging what they call organic inefficiency. That means nerves, muscles, and limbs that don't meet the Mechanicus standard are excised and replaced. You feel the cold of the surgical restraints locking you in place, the bite of the clamps as they pin your limbs to the table. Even though the neural inhibitors suppress pain, you can sense the vibrations of the machinery through your bones. Each incision, each insertion, is accompanied by the precise movement of mechanical arms, their tools glinting under the harsh light. The priests don't speak to you. They speak to the machine. Every cut, every graft, every fusion is a prayer. They start with the arms. Human hands are too fragile, too imprecise for endless labor, so they remove them first. You watch as the flesh of your forearm peels back like a curtain, revealing the pale sinew beneath. Hydraulic pistons replace muscle. Servo joints click into place where bone used to be. Cables slither beneath your skin like veins of metal. You feel the faint pressure of something heavy being bolted into your shoulder socket, the dull thud of metal meeting bone. When they test the motion, your arm jerks upward against your will. The servo whirs, and for a moment you see smoke rise from the incision where flesh and metal fuse together. The smell is acrid, unforgettable. You are watching your body become something else, something that no longer belongs to you. Next, they move to your spine. The spinal augmetic is the most invasive of all. It runs the length of your back, replacing the natural nerve clusters with a lattice of metal plates and fiber conduits. The priests call it the holy pathway, the direct line through which the omnisea's will flows. They insert thick needles at the base of your neck, feeding cables deep into your nervous system. You feel pressure, an electric pulse that radiates down your body like a wave. The connection locks into place with a metallic snap. For a brief instant, the pain pierces through the drugs, a flash of white so intense that your vision goes dark. When you come to, you can no longer feel your own heartbeat. The rhythm of the machinery has replaced it. The legs follow. The bones are replaced with reinforced steel rods. Servos are attached at the knees and ankles, tuned for endless motion. You hear the grinding sound of calibration as they test the range of motion, bending and straightening your legs without your command. The metal is cold at first, then unbearably hot as it fuses to your remaining tissue. Each joint is sealed with a resin that smells of burnt plastic and ozone. When they lift you upright for the first time, you no longer feel the weight of your own body. The machine carries it for you. Every step feels unnatural, perfectly balanced, yet hollow. There is no strain, no fatigue, no warmth, just motion, precise and empty. Your chest is opened last. You see the saw descend slowly, its teeth rotating in perfect synchronization. Sparks leap as it cuts through bone. The priests work with mechanical precision, removing your rib cage piece by piece until your organs are exposed to the cold air. Tubes descend from above, draining fluids, replacing them with coolant and synthetic blood. A mechanical pump is installed where your heart once was. You can hear it beating a dull, rhythmic thud powered by electricity. It doesn't speed up or slow down. It doesn't respond to fear or exertion. It just continues, steady and unfeeling. Around it, metal plates are installed to protect the machinery, and wires are threaded through the remains of your flesh, linking every augmentation into one system. You are no longer a living organism. You are a network of circuits and code. Your face is the last to go. A mask of cold steel slides over your jaw. Lenses are inserted where your eyes used to be, glowing faintly with internal light. You see the world in shades of data numbers, readings, and mechanical outlines replacing color and texture. The priests adjust the calibration, muttering binary canticles under their breath. Your mouth is sealed, the lips fused together by a thin line of solder. A rebreather unit replaces your vocal cords. When you exhale, it comes out as a hiss. Your voice, your expression, your humanity all gone. The only reflection you can recognize is the faint glint of metal in the polished surface of a tool tray. The conversion is not clean. Flesh and machine do not merge without conflict. Infection is common, rejection even more so. The priests treat it not as failure, but as impurity to be burned away. When tissue dies, they replace it with more metal. When circuitry fails, they cut deeper. Each repair takes you further from what you once were. They speak of the omnissiah's perfection, of the purity of machinery, but what they create is grotesque, a body that endures but no longer lives. The flicker of life that once animated your movements is replaced by the steady pulse of power lines. The warmth of blood is replaced by coolant that hums faintly as it circulates. Even the smell of your own body changes, replaced by the scent of oil, ozone, and sterilized decay. At intervals, they stop to chant. Their voices rise and fall in unison, speaking to the machine spirit as though it were a god. You realize that to them, you are an offering, a sacrifice made in metal and flesh. They are not torturers in their own minds. They are believers performing a holy act. Each bolt they drive into your bones, each cable they weave through your nerves, is a prayer of devotion. And though your mind cannot scream, your body remembers what fear used to feel like. You tremble, not from pain, but from the echo of what it once meant to be alive. The transformation continues, layer by layer, until your entire body is an artifact of engineering. You are function given form. Every muscle, every joint, every organ has been rewritten to serve a singular purpose, labor without end. You no longer require food. You no longer require rest. You are self-sustaining, self-repairing, self-contained. The human limitations that once defined you have been erased. And yet, what remains is not freedom from the body, it is imprisonment within it. You are trapped inside a shell that feels nothing, moves without command, and obeys the unseen will of the system that owns you. When they finish, the priests step back to admire their work. Their mechanical eyes flicker with faint light as they inspect every seam, every joint. They test the functions one by one, sending signals down the control lines that force your limbs to move. You stand, walk, lift, and kneel on command. There is no hesitation, no resistance. The process is complete. The human body has been conquered, transformed into the machine the Imperium demands. You are the result of centuries of devotion to efficiency and obedience, a living tool shaped by faith and fear. The line between flesh and metal no longer exists. There is no distinction, no separation, no return. The transformation is permanent, irreversible. Sanctified by the same empire that once called you human when the conversion is done. When the last wire is fused and the final seal burns into the skin, the servitor is moved to the labor stations. There is no ceremony, no recognition, no farewell. The priests record your completion in a data slate, assign you a task designation, and you are rolled away like cargo. The transport tunnels smell of rust and machine grease. Steam hisses from pipes that run along the ceiling. Other servitors stand lined up along the walls, motionless until activated, their bodies twitching occasionally as test impulses run through their systems. Some are massive, shaped for industrial labor, with hydraulic arms capable of lifting tons. Others are smaller, skeletal, their functions tied to clerical or maintenance duties. Each one has a code burned into the metal plate fixed to their chest. That number replaces everything you once were, your name, your history, your identity. You are now a component in the endless engine of the Imperium. The first command comes through the neural node, and you move without thought. The sensation is strange at first. Your body obeys, but your mind feels disconnected, floating somewhere behind the motion. The system feeds you impulses to step forward, lift, rotate, cut, and you execute them perfectly. The tasks are repetitive, precise, unrelenting. There is no room for choice or hesitation. The commands arrive in perfect intervals, and your body responds in mechanical rhythm. The hum of the factory floor fills the air, a constant drone of gears, pistons, and servos. Sparks fly from welding arcs. Smoke rises from conveyor furnaces, and through it all, the servitors move in perfect synchronization. At first, somewhere deep in the buried remnants of your consciousness, you recognize the monotony. You remember fatigue, the need to rest, the ache of muscles after long work shifts. But the servitor body does not tire. The machines inside you feed on energy cells. The coolant circulates endlessly. The mechanical heart beats with mathematical precision. You could work for days without pause, and you do. The overseers, tech adepts, enginseers, or mechanica supervisors walk between the rows of servitors, monitoring data streams on handheld cogitators. When one of the machines slows or falters, they adjust the calibration or, if necessary, deactivate it for maintenance. The deactivated ones never return the same. Sometimes they don't return at all. The loss of purpose, if you can still call it that, is what begins to rot the fragments of your consciousness that remain. The servitor has no goals, no ambition, no reward. It exists to function. You might carry cargo through the endless tunnels beneath a hive city, or operate the grinding gears of a manufactorum, or process data for the adeptus administratum. Every action is assigned. Every motion is predetermined. You are an extension of someone else's will, a cog that cannot stop turning. You do not question. You cannot. The obedience code burned into your mind suppresses every flicker of rebellion. Even thought becomes a ghostly thing, fragile and fleeting. Sometimes, fragments of memory surface, unbidden. The sound of laughter, the warmth of sunlight, the feeling of rain on your skin. They come like echoes from a forgotten life, but they are quickly overwritten by the next command sequence. The system recognizes stray thoughts as interference and corrects them, with electric impulses that ripple through your neural network. The memories fade, replaced by silence and obedience. Yet the ghosts return from time to time, like whispers of a life that refuses to vanish completely. You might see a worker, a human, and something stirs inside you, an instinct you can't name. Recognition, perhaps, or envy. But before it can take shape, the command returns, and the thought is gone. The tasks never end. The Imperium's hunger for labor is infinite. You might be stationed in the shipyards of Mars, tightening bolts on the hulls of battle cruisers. You might serve in the data furnaces beneath Terra, where servitors process information from across the galaxy, their minds linked in vast networks of collective computation. Or you might be assigned to the grim manufactorums of Armageddon, where the air is thick with ash and the walls tremble with the roar of forges. No matter the place, the pattern remains the same: motion, function, silence. There is no sleep, no conversation, no reprieve. Only the cycle of command and execution. Sometimes you catch glimpses of the priests who control you. Their robes billow as they pass, their mechanical limbs clicking softly against the metal floor. They don't see you as alive. To them, you are a tool, a perfected instrument of labor, purged of the chaos that infects emotion and choice. When they speak of you, it's in terms of efficiency and output. Servitor 42 Delta functioning at 97% capacity, one says. Another replies, initiate recalibration. Increase cycle speed by 0.3. Their words flow like data through the cold air. You hear them but cannot respond. You are not supposed to. The endless repetition begins to warp your perception of reality. The lines between moments blur until all sense of time collapses. There is no day or night, no beginning or end. The same tasks repeat until you can no longer tell if you've been working for hours or years. The only measure of time is degradation, when the joints in your body start to grind, when the sensors in your optics begin to flicker, when the coolant runs sluggish through the veins of your machine flesh. Maintenance crews perform replacements, adding new parts, new circuits, sometimes new limbs. Each alteration takes another piece of what remains of you. Some servitors are little more than torsos attached to industrial frames, their humanity reduced to a pulsing organic core. The horror isn't in the pain, it's in the permanence. You can't escape because there's nothing left that remembers how. You don't even know what freedom feels like. The command loops keep you moving, and when there is no command, you stand perfectly still, waiting. Hours can pass like that. Days. Then the signal comes again, and motion resumes as though nothing paused. You are suspended in an existence without thought, purpose, or end. The worst part is that somewhere, deep within the labyrinth of wires and memory, a fragment of consciousness watches it all happen, powerless to interfere. It's the last trace of who you once were, imprisoned behind the walls of circuitry. It screams without sound, begs without voice, forgotten by everyone including you. When the servitor malfunctions, the mechanicus does not mourn. They shut it down, recycle the usable parts, and dispose of the rest. The discarded remains are stacked in heaps, a mountain of silent forms, metal fused with flesh, faces locked in expressions of nothingness. Sometimes when you pass these piles, you feel a flicker of recognition. Maybe you knew one of them once, before the transformation. Maybe you worked beside them, spoke to them, laughed with them. But the thought drifts away as quickly as it came. You move on, the command pulse urging you forward. For those few who retain a sliver of awareness, existence becomes an endless prayer for an ending that never comes. Death would be release. Oblivion would be mercy. But servitors are denied even that. Their systems are designed to endure, to keep functioning long after any human consciousness could survive. The flesh rots, but the machine persists. Even with the biological parts decay, the circuitry continues to hum, sustained by power from the forge lines. In the deepest manufactorums, there are servitors that have been working for centuries, their human components reduced to desiccated remnants clinging to the metal frames. The machine does not die, it endures. It always endures, and as you continue to move, to lift, to serve, the realization settles like a weight inside you. There is no liberation, no redemption, no salvation. You have been stripped of everything that once defined existence: choice, emotion, purpose. The only thing left is motion without meaning, obedience without awareness. You have become the embodiment of the Imperium's creed, to serve without question, to exist without self, to labor until the body collapses and the machine reclaims the remains. And when that happens, there will be another servitor waiting to take your place, another hollow vessel ready to continue the work without pause, without thought, without end to the Imperium of man. Humanity has always been a resource, an endless ocean of flesh meant to feed the machine of survival. Within its doctrine, there's no room for compassion, no space for individuality, no acknowledgement of dignity. The Emperor's word is law, the Mechanicus' logic is faith, and the value of a person is measured only by their utility. In this world, to be human is not to be sacred, it is to be expendable. The Servitor program stands as the purest expression of that belief, the ultimate symbol of how completely the Imperium has dehumanized its own kind. The process begins with language. The people are taught from birth that service is honor, that sacrifice is glory, and that to give one's body to the Imperium is the greatest act of devotion. These are not mere slogans, they are indoctrination, etched into the collective psyche of humanity over millennia. Citizens repeat the litanies of service without understanding what they mean. They tell themselves that those who vanish into the forges, who are selected for sacred duty, have been chosen for something divine. It's easier to believe that lie than to face the truth, that the Imperium devours its children, body and soul, and calls it salvation. In the great cities of Terra, in the hive worlds and manufactorums, billions live and die without ever being seen as individuals. The administratum records them as numbers, data entries in an infinite archive. A citizen's life is defined by production quotas and compliance ratings. To the Adeptus Mechanicus, the human form is flawed, weak, and transient, something to be corrected, improved upon, or discarded. When they speak of the blessing of augmentation, they speak not of empowerment, but of control. A servitor is the logical conclusion of that belief, a being stripped of autonomy, reduced to a machine that still bleeds. The dehumanization extends far beyond the physical. It becomes culture, law, and religion. The ecclesiarchy preaches that questioning authority is heresy. The Mechanicus teaches that flesh is corruption. The Inquisition enforces compliance with fire and fear. Under this weight, even ordinary citizens begin to internalize their own worthlessness. They whisper prayers of gratitude that they have not been chosen yet, while simultaneously envying those who have, believing them to be closer to the Emperor. It's a cycle of faith and fear that keeps the entire species enslaved without the need for chains. The Servitor is simply the end stage of that cycle, the final state of perfect obedience. When a person is turned into a servitor, their humanity doesn't just vanish. It is erased deliberately, systematically. The Adeptus Mechanicus doesn't see this as cruelty, they see it as purification. To them, emotion is chaos, and the mind's independence is a flaw in design. They believe they are bringing the human closer to divinity by removing the impurities of will and flesh. They speak in their sacred Benhuric tongues as they strip away the human essence, chanting praises to the Omnissiah as if their butchery were a holy act. They do not see a man or woman lying before them. They see an inefficient machine waiting to be perfected. To the Mechanicus, individuality is dangerous. A machine that thinks for itself can malfunction. A human who questions can rebel. The Servitor solves both problems. It is incapable of rebellion, incapable of thought. It is the embodiment of order and submission, a human soul silenced under layers of steel and circuitry. The priests celebrate this as triumph. They have conquered the unpredictability of flesh. They have forged an existence where every movement, every thought, every impulse is dictated by the cold logic of machine code. In doing so, they have not elevated humanity, they have annihilated it. The Imperium sustains itself on this annihilation. It calls it loyalty, but it is dependence. It calls it faith, but it is fear. Every citizen is born into a system designed to strip them of self-worth. The servitor is merely the physical proof of what happens when that process reaches its conclusion. In a universe where survival demands total submission, humanity has redefined slavery as virtue. The bureaucrats who order the conversions never see the faces of the chosen. To them, it's a matter of numbers and efficiency. 100 new servitors means 10% faster production. 10% faster production means more weapons, more ships, more power. Each life is a calculation on a ledger, nothing more. The worst part of this dehumanization is that it hides behind piety. The language of faith makes the horror sound righteous. When the Mechanicus speaks of blessed transformation, it sounds like a reward, not a sentence. The prayers disguise the screams. The incense masks the stench of blood. The sound of chanting drowns out the noise of saws and drills. Every atrocity is sanctified, every cruelty rationalized. The faithful believe they are serving the Emperor's will, but they are only feeding the endless hunger of a system that no longer remembers why it exists. Among the lower ranks of humanity, the fear of becoming a servitor is constant but unspoken. To voice it would be heresy, and heresy is death. So they pretend reverence. They nod solemnly when a coworker vanishes for holy service. They recite prayers for the chosen soul. Inwardly, they wonder if that same fate awaits them. They work harder, obey faster, worship louder, anything to avoid notice. But the Imperium notices everything. There is no safety in obedience, only temporary delay. The same system that praises loyalty will one day consume them too, without pause or pity. Even the ones who create the servitors, the priests, the magi, the adepts are trapped in the same cycle. They too have been dehumanized, though their chains are made of belief rather than steel. They truly think they are serving a divine purpose. They see their victims not as people, but as flawed machines being improved. Their compassion has been replaced by ritual, their morality by doctrine. In their eyes, suffering is purification. They do not see cruelty because they have erased their capacity to recognize it. The servitor's dead stare reflects their own spiritual emptiness, but they are too blinded by faith to see it. In the Imperium, there's no such thing as innocence, only usefulness. Children are raised to serve, workers are trained to endure, soldiers are conditioned to die. The servitor represents the perfect citizen, obedient, tireless, unquestioning. It is everything the Imperium wants humanity to become. That is the true horror, not the machines or the procedures, but the idea that the Empire sees this as success. That the annihilation of self is considered purity. That the ultimate goal of human civilization is not enlightenment or freedom, but submission so complete that life and death are indistinguishable. Every structure of the Imperium reinforces this belief. The propaganda scrolls, the sermons, the statues, the endless chants, all of it reminds the people that their worth lies only in their service. The thought that they might exist for themselves is inconceivable. The system ensures that no one remembers a time when humanity valued itself as more than fuel for war. Even the memory of dignity has been scrubbed away by generations of indoctrination. What remains is a species that worships its own oppression and calls it devotion. And so the servitor becomes the perfect symbol of the Imperium's triumph and its tragedy. It is what happens when a civilization forgets the meaning of humanity. The cold flesh bound to iron, the empty eyes staring into nothing, the eternal obedience without thought. These are the faces of progress in the 41st millennium. Every servitor that toils in silence is a mirror held up to the empire that created it, a reflection of a species that has traded its soul for survival. They are reminders of how far mankind has fallen, and how the Imperium, in its quest to preserve humanity, has instead perfected its destruction. Obedience is the foundation upon which the Imperium stands. It is the lifeblood of its armies, the engine of its factories, the faith that binds its billions of citizens under a single suffocating order. Every man, woman, and child is taught that to obey is to honor the emperor, and to disobey is to invite damnation. This belief is not merely enforced through laws or fear, it is woven into the very essence of life itself. Obedience becomes instinct, worship, survival. But beneath the hymns and catechisms, beneath the illusion of divine purpose, lies a darker truth. The kind of obedience demanded by the Imperium is not loyalty, it is annihilation of the self. In the Imperium's vast and merciless hierarchy, obedience is not a virtue freely given. It is a reflex beaten into existence. From the moment a citizen is born, they are conditioned to submit. The nursery lullabies are hymns of compliance, sung to ensure that even a child learns to bow before unseen authority. The schools teach not to question, but to memorize and repeat. The priests of the ecclesiarchy fill every waking moment with the sound of obedience rituals, chants, and confessions that glorify servitude as holiness. Even thought becomes an act of submission, filtered through fear of blasphemy. It is not enough to obey in body. The Imperium demands obedience of the soul. Nowhere is this more horrifyingly realized than in the creation of servitors. They are not merely obedient, they are the very embodiment of obedience. Their will is stripped, their mind erased, their flesh reshaped into instruments of pure compliance. The transformation from human to servitor is the final step in the Imperium's doctrine of control. A human being, with dreams and doubts and a heartbeat of their own, becomes a living tool, one that cannot rebel, cannot hesitate, cannot even desire. In the mind of the Adeptus Mechanicus, this is not murder. It is perfection. They have crafted the ultimate servant, one incapable of sin, because it is incapable of thought. What makes this horror so profound is that it is done in the name of faith. The priests and magi do not see cruelty in their actions. To them, the removal of free will is an act of mercy, a purification of purpose. They believe that the emperor's will is absolute, and that individual desire is the root of corruption. The servitor, then, is the purest being imaginable, unburdened by choice, free from temptation, incapable of error. In a twisted irony, the Imperium sees its most enslaved creations as the most blessed. They are saints of obedience, martyrs who never had a chance to refuse. For those who live under the Imperium's rule, the worship of obedience becomes a way to survive. The fear of punishment is absolute. To speak against an order, even in private thought, is to risk execution or worse. The Inquisition watches, the ecclesiarchy listens, the Mechanicus records. The air itself feels like it listens. So people learn to obey with smiles, to pray as they tremble, to convince themselves that servitude is sanctity. When the decree comes that a worker is to be repurposed as a servitor, no one questions it. They bow their heads and whisper blessings for his honored service. They do not dare to mourn him as dead. Because in the Imperium, grief can look too much like doubt. Even the soldiers of the Imperial Guard, who face death daily, are bound by obedience that goes beyond courage. They are trained to march into certain death without hesitation, to die by the thousands if commanded. The commissars ensure this with bolt pistols to the back of any man who hesitates. The same doctrine that creates servitors also creates soldiers who see their lives as currency, spent without question. The difference is that the servitor no longer knows he has a life to lose. Both exist to serve, and neither has the right to choose. The only distinction is awareness. The moral horror of obedience lies in how completely it consumes morality itself. In the Imperium, there is no good or evil, only order and heresy. A man can murder 1,000 innocents if ordered to, and it will be called righteous. A worker can turn the key that begins another's transformation into a servitor, and it will be called holy duty. The system absolves all sin through obedience. Responsibility dissolves upward, disappearing into the faceless bureaucracy of the ecclesiarchy and the Mechanicus. No one feels guilt because guilt requires choice, and choice has long been forbidden. The culture of obedience breeds a kind of numbness, a spiritual decay that spreads through generations. The people no longer imagine what freedom feels like. The priests no longer remember what mercy is. The magi no longer recognize cruelty. The entire Imperium exists in a kind of moral stasis, a silence so deep that even screams sound like prayers. In this silence, the servitor is the final echo, the perfect servant who no longer needs to be told to obey because it no longer knows how not to. The servitor's body tells the story of this obedience in every line and scar. Tubes pierce the flesh where veins once pulsed with life. Metal plates replace muscle. Pistons move where tendons once stretched. Its face, stripped of expression, becomes a symbol of total surrender. Every command is obeyed instantly, flawlessly. There is no resistance, no hesitation, no misunderstanding. To the Mechanicus, this is beauty. They watch their creation move and call it harmony. They see the seamless merging of flesh and machine as a hymn to order. The servitor does not err, and therefore it does not sin. It has been perfected through obedience, but beneath that perfection lies tragedy beyond comprehension. Once, every servitor was a person, a worker, a soldier, a scholar, a dreamer. Each had memories, fears, hopes. All of that is gone, overwritten by code and control. Yet fragments sometimes remain. A flicker in the eyes, a tremor in the hands, a whisper that doesn't belong to the programming. These are the ghosts of humanity, trapped in bodies that can no longer resist. The Imperium calls these malfunctions, but they are reminders that even in perfect obedience, the soul struggles to remember what it was. The priests of the Mechanicus perform the rites of obedience with solemn devotion. They anoint the machinery with sacred oils, chant Ben-Huruk litanies, and recite the canticles of control. To them, the transformation is not horror, it is ritual. They believe they are shepherding lost souls into the machine God's embrace. The line between faith and fanaticism dissolves completely. Every incision is a prayer, every scream a hymn, every silence an offering. They do not hear the cries of agony. They hear the Emperor's will being fulfilled. To disobey in such a world is not just rebellion, it is blasphemy. It is to deny the structure that has defined human existence for 10,000 years. The few who try are hunted as heretics, mutants, traitors. They vanish into the black cells of the Inquisition or the furnaces of the forges. Even their memory is erased because disobedience cannot be allowed to exist as an idea. The Imperium's survival depends on this. Without obedience, the vast machinery of its empire would collapse under the weight of its own decay. And so it sacrifices humanity to preserve itself. Layer by layer, mind by mind. In the factories and forges, in the ships and shrines, in the endless cities where billions labor without ever seeing the sky. Obedience has replaced faith as the true God of mankind. The Emperor is its symbol, the Mechanicus its priests, the servitors its angels, wings of metal, hearts of silence. Every citizen, whether by fear or conviction, worships this God of control. And the more they obey, the less they remain themselves. In the end, obedience does not bind them to each other, it isolates them. Every person becomes an island of submission, afraid to speak, afraid to think. They no longer serve out of belief, but out of terror that they will be noticed. The servitor no longer fears, no longer feels, no longer knows. It has achieved what every human in the Imperium is trained to become, the perfect servant, silent and unquestioning, existing only to obey in the Imperium of man. Death is not feared as much as failure. Death is an accepted end, a moment of release granted by the Emperor's mercy. A quiet cessation after a lifetime of toil and obedience. But to become something less than human, to continue existing without identity, purpose, or will is a torment beyond comprehension. To be turned into a servitor is not to die. but to be denied the right to die. It is the perverse inversion of life itself, a mockery of what it means to be mortal. Death offers peace. Servitude offers only unending silence. When a citizen is condemned to servitorhood, their body is not destroyed, it is repurposed. Their mind is not killed, it is stripped, hollowed, rewritten. Machines preserve what should have perished, binding nerves and sinew to steel, forcing motion where there should be stillness. This mechanical resurrection is portrayed as an honor, a way to serve the emperor beyond the limits of flesh. But there is no sanctity in it, only horror. A man dies once. A servitor dies every moment it exists. In the grim order of the Imperium, death carries dignity. Soldiers die with their weapons in hand. Workers collapse beside their machines. Priests perish whispering prayers to the golden throne. Their deaths are mourned, recorded, sanctified. But a servitor's existence erases all traces of what came before. There are no names, no graves, no remembrance. Once converted, the individual is removed from the roles of the living and the dead. It is as though they never existed at all. In a universe obsessed with faith and sacrifice, there's no ritual to mark this transformation, no prayer to guide the lost soul. The servitor is not seen as a person who has suffered. It is seen as an instrument that functions. The mechanicus treats the process with clinical detachment. The human subject is dissected not to destroy, but to preserve. Each nerve cluster is mapped, each brain segment examined, each trace of emotion methodically erased. Neural dampeners suppress individuality, memory cores overwrite thought, and subroutines dictate every movement. The transformation is meticulous because it must be absolute, no flicker of consciousness, no trace of rebellion. When the process is complete, the body remains warm, the heart may still beat. But the mind, the essence of being, has been reduced to a machine's whisper. It is this contradiction that defines why servitude is worse than death. The body persists, but the soul has no voice. The lights behind the eyes dim, but they do not go out. Deep within the mechanical stillness, something remains aware, trapped beneath layers of obedience protocols and electric command. Some tech priests whisper of ghost signals, faint flickers of human emotion that interfere with the servitor's function. Moments when the machine hesitates, when the eyes tremble, when a tear escapes though there is no memory of pain. These anomalies are quickly purged, the code rebalanced, the body recalibrated. But they hint at a nightmare truth, that a fragment of the original mind might still be conscious, screaming into the void with no mouth to speak. To die is to end. To serve forever is to endure without purpose. The Imperium calls it immortality, but it is not life extended, it is decay postponed. A servitor may function for centuries, its parts replaced, its circuits refreshed. It will never age, never tire, never rest. It exists in a loop of endless labor, fulfilling commands that have long since lost meaning. In the forges of Mars, servitors hammer molten steel for wars whose soldiers have turned to dust. In the cathedrals of Terra, they polish marble floors that no one walks upon. Their tasks continue long after those who ordered them are forgotten. They do not stop because they do not know how the tragedy lies not only in the suffering of the individual but in the system that justifies it. The Imperium glorifies this fate as divine service, declaring that no sacrifice is too great for the emperor. It teaches that to give one's body to the machine god is a sacred duty, that the loss of self is the price of purity. Yet this theology is built upon fear, not faith. It is the fear of disorder, of rebellion, of choice. The servitor embodies perfect obedience, and in that perfection, the Imperium sees stability. It is easier to sanctify slavery than to confront the fragility of its empire. The horror of servitorhood extends beyond the flesh. It represents the death of empathy in a civilization that worships efficiency. To the mechanicus, the human body is raw material. To the administratum, the human mind is data. The transformation of people into tools is not seen as tragedy, it is bureaucracy. Each servitor has a serial number, a maintenance schedule, an expiration date. The system does not acknowledge the loss of a life. It simply logs the allocation of resources. This normalization of dehumanization is what makes it so insidious. Evil in the Imperium is rarely personal. It is procedural. In this reality, death becomes an act of freedom. It is the one thing the Imperium cannot control. A dying soldier can curse his commanders. A heretic can choose defiance in their final breath. Even in agony, the dying retain a sliver of choice. The servitor has no such privilege. Its breath is mechanical, its voice synthesized, its will erased. It cannot die without permission, cannot even wish for death. It endures because endurance is written into its circuitry. It functions until its parts fail, and even then, its remains are recycled into another form of labor. Nothing is wasted, not even the suffering. The workers who witness the creation of servitors whisper their fears in secret. They see what becomes of those deemed inefficient, rebellious, or simply unlucky. They pray for death before conscription, for illness before reassignment. In a world where faith demands submission, death is the last act of freedom left. It is a final refusal, a way to escape the machine that consumes all. The thought is heretical, but it lingers in every dark corner of the hive cities, in every whisper traded over dim ration lights. Better to die forgotten than to live without self. The moral inversion of the Imperium lies in how it rewards suffering. The priests call servitorhood a blessing, the forge masters call it progress, the commanders call it necessity. Yet all of them avert their eyes from the truth. To serve eternally without mind or soul is not salvation, it is punishment. It is proof that the Imperium does not worship the Emperor as a god of men, but as a god of control. The more obedient its subjects become, the less human they are allowed to remain. The servitor is the end of that path, the ultimate believer incapable of doubt, incapable of sin, incapable of being in this light. Death regains its sacredness. To die is to remain human to the last breath. The Imperium may consume bodies, but it cannot enslave the dead. Their suffering ends where the servitor's begins. This is why soldiers whisper prayers for swift deaths, why martyrs embrace the flame, why even the condemned smile when the bolt pistol rises. They have seen what happens to those who survive. They have seen the hollow eyes of the servitors, the trembling hands that no longer know what they once held, the mouths that speak commands without understanding their meaning. The Imperium calls them eternal servants of the Emperor. The truth is simpler, crueler. They are the dead who were not allowed to die.